My husband beat me and the next day he fled with the children to another state. I loved him, but he didn't care because he had a mistress. I did everything to get the children back and he suffered for it, and that was all it was. For years I told myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Alex was strict, yes, even controlling, but he loved our children. That's what kept me going. I wanted a family, a safe home for my children, and I convinced myself that staying was the right thing to do. But Alex wasn't just strict, he was a tyrant. He decided what I wore, who I talked to, and even how I spent time with our children. I felt like a shadow in my own life. Still, I stayed because I loved him, or at least the idea of the man I thought he could be. Then I found out about the mistress. I'd suspected it for a while, the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, but the confirmation felt like a punch in the gut. He wasn't even subtle about it. "She's just a friend," he said when I confronted him. But I knew better. I thought about leaving, but how could I? I had no money, no support, and I couldn't risk losing my children. So I stayed, biting my tongue and hoping things would change. They didn't. One night I told him I couldn't stand how much time he spent away from home. I tried to be calm, but he snapped. His words cut deep, and before I knew it, his hand was across my face. I ended up in the hospital that night. When I came home, the house was empty. My children were gone. When I walked into the empty house, it felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. The silence was suffocating. The children's toys were gone, their clothes had disappeared from the drawers. On the dining room table, I found a single note in Alex's handwriting. "The children are with me. Don't try to find us. They're better off without you." I felt my knees buckle. I collapsed into the chair, clutching the note in my shaking hands. My mind raced. Where had he taken it? How could he just snatch it from me? I thought about calling him, but I knew it would be useless. He was always calculating, always one step ahead. This wasn't an impulsive move, he'd planned it. I had no idea where to start, but I knew I had to do something. I picked up my phone and called Sarah, my best friend. She was the only person who knew the full extent of what I was going through. When she picked up, I could barely get the words out between sobs. "He took them, Sarah. He took the children and left." Her voice was calm but determined. "We'll find them. I'll be there in an hour." I didn't sleep that night. Sarah sat with me, going over every piece of information we had, his favorite places, his family members, anything that might give us a lead. Then she said something that made my heart sink. "What if he left the state?" That's when it hit me. Alex always talked about starting over somewhere far away. He wasn't just going to leave me, he was going to erase me from her life. The morning after Alex took the kids, I dragged myself out of bed, fueled by desperation and sheer will. Sarah was already on her laptop at the kitchen table, scrolling through Alex's social media profiles and email accounts. "He's too arrogant to completely cover his tracks," she said. "There's got to be something." She was right. Alex loved to be in control, but he also loved to show off. If he left any clues, they'd be buried in plain sight. After hours of digging, Sarah found it, a transaction on his joint account for a rental property in another state. My stomach sank. The address was 4 hours away, in a small town I'd never heard of. It wasn't much, but it was something. I packed an overnight bag, grabbed every document I had on the kids, and got in the car with Sarah. The drive was tense and silent. I stared out the window, my mind racing. What would I do when I found them? Would Alex even let me see them? Or worse, what if he'd already moved them? When we finally arrived, the address led us to a modest house on a quiet cul-de-sac. My heart raced as I parked a few doors down, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight it hurt. We waited for hours, watching the house. Then, as the sun began to set, I saw them. My 2 little ones, running around the yard, laughing like nothing was wrong. My chest hurt when I saw them. But then I saw Alex. He stepped out onto the porch, laughing with her. His mistress. She was holding my youngest, cradling her like she had a right to. Sarah had to grab my arm to keep me from running out of the car. Not yet, she said firmly. If you go in there now, it'll make things worse. We have to do this the right way. She was right. As much as I wanted to storm the house and get my kids back, I needed help. We went straight to the nearest police station and told them everything. At the police station, I spilled everything: how Alex had taken the kids without my consent, his history of controlling behavior, and the fact that he'd hit me right before he disappeared. I handed over every document I had: birth certificates, custody papers, and even hospital records from the night he'd sent me to the emergency room. The officer listened intently, nodding as I spoke. But then he dropped a bomb. Ma'am, since he is her father, this is not technically considered a kidnapping unless there is a court order restricting his custody. I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. So what? He can just take her and there's nothing I can do? Not exactly, he said. If there's evidence of abuse or danger to the children, we can escalate this. But you'll also need to request an emergency custody hearing. Sarah stepped in, her voice calm. What can we do now to get your children back safely? The officer looked at the address of the rental house we'd found. We can do a welfare check? If we see anything concerning, we'll get Child Protective Services involved right away. It wasn't the immediate action I wanted, but it was a start. The drive back to the house felt even longer than the first. 2 squad cars followed us, their presence both comforting and unnerving. When we arrived, the officers asked me to stay in the car while they approached the house. From where I was sitting, I could see everything. Alex answered the door, his face quickly changing from surprise to annoyance. He tried to act like nothing was wrong, gesturing casually as he spoke to the officers. Then I saw his mistress peek out from behind him, holding my youngest. The officers went inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Minutes later, one of them returned to the car. Ma'am, we're going to bring the children out to talk to you. But you need to stay calm. The moment my children came into view, tears streamed down my face. I hugged them tightly and whispered that everything was going to be okay. But before I could say anything else, Alex stormed out of the house. You're unbelievable, he snapped at me. Bringing the cops into this? Do you know how that makes me look? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The officers were already taking notes, documenting his outburst. The next morning, I filed for an emergency custody hearing. My lawyer, a fierce but compassionate woman named Linda, assured me that we had a strong case. We'll show the court everything: his abusive behavior, the unauthorized move, and the fact that he exposed the kids to his mistress instead of providing a stable environment, she said. But Alex didn't back down. He hired a flashy lawyer who was all about discrediting me. They filed their own lawsuit, accusing me of being emotionally unstable and neglectful. Reading these accusations felt like a punch in the gut. The first court appearance was tense. Alex sat across from me, cool and smug, while I tried to remain calm. The judge asked why he moved the kids out of state without telling me. Alex lied through his teeth and said it was for the children's safety because I was unpredictable. But my lawyer wouldn't let him off that easy. Linda presented hospital records showing my injuries from his abuse and police reports documenting the welfare check. She even had statements from Sarah and a neighbor who'd witnessed his controlling behavior. When the judge asked Alex about the mistress, he tried to downplay it, saying she was just helping out with the kids. But Linda had messages from his phone, texts between him and the mistress, in which she complained that the children were a burden and suggested sending them to boarding school. As the hearing continued, Alex's calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, raising his voice and interrupting the judge. At one point, he even accused me of ruining his life by getting the police involved. The judge was not impressed. At the end of the session, the judge granted me temporary full custody and issued a restraining order against Alex, prohibiting him from contacting me or the children outside of supervised visits. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew it wasn't over. With temporary custody granted, I felt a small sense of relief, but Alex wasn't done yet. His arrogance wouldn't let him accept the court's decision. Instead, he filed an appeal claiming that I was poisoning the children against him, and that the court was biased. I prepared for another round, but this time I had a plan. My lawyer worked tirelessly to gather more evidence, including testimony from people who had witnessed Alex's behavior over the years. Sarah played a crucial role. She provided details of how Alex had manipulated me and even shared recordings of his angry outbursts that she had made during phone calls. The next court date came and Alex showed up with his mistress, as if bringing her along would somehow prove he was a stable parent. It backfired spectacularly. Linda introduced the messages we had uncovered, emphasizing how little his mistress cared for the children and how she had encouraged Alex to keep them away from me. Then came the testimony. The neighbor who had seen him yelling at me in the driveway spoke of his temper. The officer who conducted the welfare check shared how Alex had tried to make light of the situation while clearly upset. Finally, Sarah testified, calmly recounting the abuse I had endured and how Alex had taken the children while I was in the hospital. Alex tried to interrupt, shouting that everyone was lying. The judge quickly silenced him, warning that his behavior proved the very allegations against him. The breaking point came when Linda revealed the financial records. Alex had drained our joint account to fund his move and pay for his mistress's expenses. The judge was furious. In the end, the court ruled in my favor. Not only was I awarded full custody of the children, but Alex was found guilty of violating custody laws by taking the children out of state without consent. His actions, combined with the allegations of abuse and financial misconduct, resulted in a 2-year prison sentence. When the verdict was announced, Alex's smugness finally crumbled. He tried to plead with me outside the courtroom, but I walked away without a word. As I walked out of that courtroom with full custody of my children, it felt like I could finally breathe again. Alex was led away in handcuffs, his mistress nowhere to be seen. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of peace. But I knew this wasn't the end. There was still so much to rebuild. The children were confused and frightened. They didn't fully understand what had happened, and I didn't know how much they had heard or seen during their time with Alex. I focused on making them feel safe again. I took time off work to spend every day with them, answering their questions in ways they could understand and showering them with love and reassurance. But staying in the same house where so many of those dark moments had happened didn't feel right. I needed a fresh start, not only for myself, but for my children. Sarah, always my rock, suggested we make a big change. "Why not leave it all behind?" she said. At first, the idea of uprooting everything felt overwhelming, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. After weeks of planning, I sold the house, packed our bags, and made the decision to move to Europe. I had always dreamed of living somewhere quiet and beautiful, and this was our chance to start over. The kids were hesitant at first, but once we settled into our new home, they began to thrive. The fresh air, new surroundings, and distance from the chaos were just what we needed. Sometimes I sit on the porch of our new home and think about everything we went through to get here. It still feels surreal, the abuse, the betrayal, the legal battles, but those memories are no longer chains around my neck. They're reminders of how far we've come. Alex will be out of prison in a few years, but I'm no longer afraid. I have full custody, and I've built a new life for myself and my children, a life he can't touch. I feel free for the first time in years. Just when I thought things were settling down, I began to notice strange things. At first it was small things: unfamiliar cars parked near the house, people looking at us for a second too long in the marketplace. I chalked it up to paranoia. After all we'd been through, I figured it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But then one night I caught someone standing across the street from our house, smoking and staring right at my window. When I turned on the light, they walked away and disappeared into the shadows. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down I felt it. Something wasn't right. A few days later, Sarah called me from the States, her voice tense. "I have something to tell you," she said. "I heard from someone who knows Alex's family. Apparently, he's been talking from prison about how you stole his kids. They say he hired someone to keep an eye on you." My stomach dropped. "You're telling me he's still trying to control us? From prison?" Yes, she said. You need to be careful. This isn't over. Her words played over and over in my mind. I realized that the people I'd seen weren't random. Alex, even locked away, was finding ways to reach into my life. I didn't wait to find out how far these people were willing to go. That same night, I packed our essentials and left the house with the kids. We didn't say goodbye to anyone. I couldn't risk it. I drove to a small town far from where we had settled, paying cash for everything to leave no trace. I found a quiet inn where we could stay while I figured out our next steps. My heart ached for the stability I thought we'd finally achieved, but my priority was the safety of my children. The next morning, I went to the local authorities and explained everything. They promised to investigate, but I knew from experience that promises weren't enough. I needed a long-term plan. In the small inn, I felt trapped, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every creak in the floorboards or knock on the door made my heart race. I had no one to turn to, no resources, and nowhere else to go. But then an unexpected lifeline appeared. While speaking with local authorities, I was introduced to a man named Daniel. He was a legal advocate who worked closely with victims of domestic violence. He had a sharp, no-nonsense demeanor, but he seemed genuinely interested in helping. After hearing my story, he leaned forward and said, "Your husband has gone too far. If he's hired people to follow you, that's not just harassment, it's criminal. We have to stop this before it escalates." I hesitated. "But how? He's in jail. What more can I do?" Daniel nodded. "That's the point. If he's orchestrating this from behind bars, we can use it against him. But you have to trust me." Daniel worked quickly. He put me in touch with a private investigator, someone who could confirm whether the men I'd seen were connected to Alex. Within days, the investigator uncovered a lead. One of the men had been in contact with Alex's mistress. It was clear they were following me on Alex's orders. Armed with this information, Daniel filed a formal complaint with the authorities. They issued a search warrant for the homes of the men who had been following us. The search turned up damning evidence, emails, wire transfers, and detailed notes about my whereabouts and daily routine. It was frightening to see how much they knew about me and my children. As the investigation progressed, Daniel urged me to stay in hiding. "He's not just trying to scare you," he said. "He's trying to regain control. And if he can't do it legally, he'll do it by any means necessary." I rented a new place, even farther from the inn, using cash and a fake name. The kids were scared but resilient. I told them we were on an adventure and turned it into a game to distract them. But every night after they fell asleep, I lay awake wondering if we'd ever feel safe again. Then, one night, Daniel called with news. Alex had been caught in prison using a smuggled cell phone to send instructions to his hired men. The authorities were adding new charges to his sentence, including harassment, conspiracy, and endangerment. The news of Alex's additional charges brought a strange mix of relief and dread. While I was glad the authorities were taking action, the thought of him still trying to control my life even from prison was haunting. Then came the court date. Daniel insisted that I attend, even though the thought of facing Alex again made my stomach churn. "You have to show him you're not afraid," he said. "This is your chance to regain control." The courtroom was cold and sterile, a fitting setting for the man who had turned my life into a nightmare. Alex sat at the defendant's table, shackled but still holding himself with the same arrogance I knew all too well. When it was my turn to speak, I took a deep breath and looked directly at him. I told the judge about the fear my children and I had lived with, the abuse, and how he continued to torment us even from behind bars. I didn't cry, although my voice was shaking. I didn't want to give Alex the satisfaction of seeing me break. The evidence was overwhelming: emails, wire transfers, and even recordings from his smuggled cell phone. His lawyer tried to spin it as a misunderstanding, but the judge didn't buy it. When the verdict came, it was like a weight was lifted off my chest. Alex was sentenced to another 5 years, with no chance of early parole. The judge also granted me a permanent restraining order, ensuring that he could never legally come near me or the children again. With Alex behind bars for the foreseeable future, Daniel helped me finalize my plans to leave the country. Staying where Alex had ties felt too risky. I sold what little I had left, secured new documents for myself and the children, and booked a one-way flight to Europe. The day we left, I stood at the airport holding my children's hands. They didn't fully understand why we were leaving, but they trusted me. As the plane took off, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. We settled in a quiet village in France, far from the chaos and fear that had consumed our lives. The children started school and slowly adjusted to their new surroundings. I found work in a small bakery, a far cry from the life I'd once imagined, but it was peaceful and honest. I told myself I would never look back, but some nights the memories crept in. I thought about Alex, about how someone I once loved could turn into a monster. But then I'd look at my children, thriving and happy, and remind myself that I did the right thing. It's been 2 years since we left. The scars of what happened will never fully heal, but I've learned to live with them. My children are safe, and that's all that matters. I've also learned something about myself. I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. Alex tried to break me, but he failed. I have rebuilt our lives from the ground up, and no one will ever take that away from me. As I write this, my children are playing outside, their laughter filling the air. It's a sound I'll never take for granted again. We are free.